This is CBC Windsor News. I'm Chris Hensing. Thanks for joining us. Our top stories. New details on a police partnership with social workers, how it aims to help people experiencing intimate partner violence. We have an exclusive look at a tool used to help prevent cross-border crime, why the Port Authority uses a radar system to track boat movement. As we talk about changing climates, researchers have questions about the wildfire in Jasper, why they think it may have generated a rare fire tornado. We begin tonight with the worry and stress gripping Windsor's Lebanese community. Families are watching the violence unfold in Lebanon. For one man, it's meant the loss of his childhood home and growing concern for loved ones still in the country. Dale Molnar has more.
Actually, I'm so afraid because my brother was 2 kids and his wife just running from place to place because there's no safe place to stay.
Actually, what's going on now in Lebanon is terrifying for me.
Former Lebanese journalist Makram Kamal and filmmaker Rawad Kansoun both know of people injured in Lebanon as tensions have increased over the past few days. The bombing has literally hit home for Kansoun.
30 minutes ago, I received a call from a friend in Beirut that he said that they bombed our house.
It's the house he grew up in. His mother and father are now homeless. Kansoun is getting images from friends and relatives who live in Lebanon. Israel has launched the heaviest airstrikes against Lebanon since a 2006 war over the past week, killing more than 600 people. Israel claims the attacks are hitting Hezbollah targets. Kansoun says he was in Beirut in 2006 and says the bombings now are widespread and it's difficult to find a place that's safe.
There is a real war happening in Lebanon. There is no safe place in Lebanon. They are bombing Beirut, the south, the north, Byblos, suburbs of Beirut. There is no safe point in Lebanon.
Hezbollah launched more than 100 rockets into northern Israel on Sunday. The tensions have people in the local Jewish community concerned for people there as well. And Marian Zeller, the executive director of the Windsor Jewish Federation and Community Center, says the tensions there are resulting in Jewish people here being harassed.
Locally, just the amount of violence that's been turned towards this community, towards the Jewish community, is upsetting.
Zeller would like to see a ceasefire, which several countries are calling for. Kamal believes everyone should be able to live together in peace and wants to see the hostilities stop.
Our leaders, they must start thinking about saving lives, not using lives.
Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
When Windsor police officers respond to a domestic violence call and a charge is laid, a social worker will now arrive on scene to assist the victim in real time. It's a new 3-month pilot project announced today. It involves Windsor Police, Family Services Windsor Essex, the Hiatus House, and Windsor Regional Hospital.
No more leaving a pamphlet with them and with the hope that they're going to call.
So what this allows us to do is to get ahead of that and to be identifying people who have not made a choice to reach out for specific services, right? It's sort of coming to them and maybe reaching a whole group of people that we've not been able to reach in the past.
Starting tomorrow, social workers will be available to respond at the scene with officers Wednesday through Sunday. That's from 3 p.m. until 11 p.m. They will not be riding with the officers. Police say numbers show that roughly half of all domestic violence calls happen between those times. Outside of those hours, officers are told to connect victims to the Hiatus House 24-hour crisis line. One reason police say that this partnership has been created is because IPV cases are on the rise in Windsor, up 7.1% this year compared to 2023. In those moments after a victim is abused by their partner, one of the 5 social workers assigned to respond will provide what they call psychological first aid.
So we're really going to try to work to start where they're at. Right? Explore their emotions, give them an understanding of what trauma impacts are in terms of even over the next few days, how you might feel fatigued. We're going to validate that you're going to feel a range of emotions, and we're not going to put them on the spot to make any big decisions.
We want to give you an exclusive look at a radar tool being used to track boats in our area. It's something that the Port Authority uses to keep people safe when they're out on the water. It's also being used by law enforcement.
Hi, my name is Peter Barry. I'm the Harbour Master of the Windsor Port Authority. I want to walk you through the steps that we have using the radar called Accipiter here in Windsor. So if you look at the screen here, all these green dots are not things that you would see getting subscribing to marine traffic or looking at BoatNerd. But these green dots are small recreational boats that are typically not picked up by an AIS traditional radar. So what we're seeing is these are the small guys that in navigation world we wouldn't see. So even a big ship will see some of the blips on it, but we can look towards the forward path, which is here. This is where the big ships will go up to the St. Clair Channel. But we can see there is traffic up there. There are fishermen, there's other boats in the way. So we could start notifying through to the other ships, this is what we're seeing and to take care. During the summer, this is full of vessels. So when we're looking for a commercial ship, much like this cruise ship going through, we want to be able to tell them there's a lot of traffic, you're going to need to slow, or you're going to keep to the US side or the Canadian side. So we look at this as navigation tool, but looking at this as intelligence-driven law enforcement, it's important. As we look at cross-border activity, as we look at who's making trips and not reporting into either CBP or to Canada Customs, all that can be tracked with this technology. And then using the radar when the time came to intercept these bad guys several months later in investigation, the radar was integral to tracking where they were coming from and when they arrived to Canada for the authorities to make that arrest. So it's very important.
It's extremely useful. We've done surge operations where we've had an RCMP member watching the Escalation radar and calling out to our vessels to intercept boats coming from the United States into Canada, so we can do boarding and ask them all the appropriate customs clearance questions.
It's busy. We have a lot of human smuggling going through the St. Clair River. We have guns crossing, we have drugs crossing. So we have a series of tools that is not only a response tool, but it's a crime prevention tool. Knowing that it's here, knowing that it's available, that you can be tracked, and it's solid technology.
Front yard parking could be coming to the Walkerville area. City Hall will consider a pilot program to allow front yard driveways in that part of Windsor.
You know, I drive up and down those streets quite frequently, and you know, I've brought this up to administration before, and the more I look at it, I'm like, you know what, these cars are parked in there so tight because, again, nobody has these driveways in the front. They all want to be parking in the front where it's actually safe to park. I'm going to put a motion forward to adopt a pilot project in Ward 4 to allow front yard driveways and on-street accessible parking spots.
Windsor's current parking bylaw is strict about not allowing parking on front yards. There have been crackdowns on front yard parking in past years, but Councillor Mark McKenzie said he's heard from many residents in his ward that they need parking on their properties. Many neighborhoods in the area lack driveways. Street parking spots are also in high demand. Residents also report that alley parking, which McKenzie says is increasingly unsafe, is something that they use. McKenzie suggests the pilot program could last 2 years. There's about 100 people in Aamjiwnaang First Nation preparing to evacuate their homes. They're on alert now that a neighboring plastics plant in Sarnia is preparing to remove toxic chemicals. The work starts next week, but Chief Janelle Namabin says that nailing down a specific date for evacuation has been difficult.
I received an email this morning saying that there may be a change of date. So it's been very challenging for us to try to prepare and communicate what we are hearing to the community, and then hearing that there may be a day difference.
Alert systems have been warning people about increased benzene emissions this week, but nothing at the threshold that would require an evacuation. INEOS is removing the product from tanks to upgrade their systems. That's being done by order of both the provincial and federal governments. Joining us now for a live look at the weather is Chris Potter. We've been keeping an eye on that storm all week. What do we know now?
Yeah, I mean, Helene is a monster in terms of a hurricane. It was upgraded to a Category 3, which means it's a major hurricane. It will likely intensify a little bit more, gaining strength as it starts to near the Big Bend region of Florida, which is basically where the peninsula matches the panhandle. And max sustained winds are estimated at 205 kilometers an hour right now, likely intensifying to around 215 kilometers an hour. And the hurricane force winds extend about 100 kilometers out from the center. The storm, the eye wall. And tropical storm force winds greater than 65 kilometers an hour extend more than 500 kilometers. So wind damage is a guarantee. Extensive power outages, that's a guarantee. In Miami, the National Hurricane Center is calling this life-threatening and catastrophic, and rightfully so. The storm surge could actually be about 20 feet, basically 6 meters, which means if you're standing at the foot of the shoreline, or the coastline, I should say, picture 20 feet up and how far that ocean water will go in. So coastal flooding, coastal erosion, coastal damage is guaranteed, but inland flooding is potential as well, because it's going to be slow moving as it continues to move through the Florida Panhandle up towards Georgia, and then it basically stalls out towards Tennessee and Kentucky. By that point, it will have lost a lot of the tropical characteristics. It's going to lose a lot of energy, but we're talking about 300 to 500 millimeters of rainfall. And I mentioned this because it stalls south of the lower Great Lakes. So will it have an impact on our weather by the weekend? Yes and no. The yes will be cloud cover and maybe a few showers, but we're not talking flooding rainfall. This is not the setup for that. Luckily, we have an upper ridge which will hold that system at bay to the south. Normal daytime high for this time of year, 21.8. Seasonable today, around 20 right now in Windsor, 19 in Goderich. Humidity rather, not a big factor. It basically felt as high as the mid-20s, so it was a beautiful day, but a little dim, if you will, with quite a bit of cloud overhead. And that's going to be the story as we step forward through the overnight as well. Basically, it's not quite Helene right now, but some of that moisture is advancing northward, and the end result is that mid to high level cloud that we have overhead, and once again that produces kind of a dim weather day. Same story as we step forward into the day tomorrow. It will be a little dimmer, no real threat of rainfall at all. Once we get through Friday night and into Saturday, we will have the potential for a few of these passing showers from time to time, but not much more than that. Won't be extensive, won't be heavy, but it's a little unsettled nonetheless. It's just a low risk at this point. And as we step forward into Sunday, more of the same, still locked in with lots of cloud cover, and all that moisture will hold just south of the lower Great Lakes, possibly advancing up towards Windsor. So overnight lows anywhere from 13 in London, 17 in Windsor and Leamington. As we get into the day tomorrow, daytime highs will be just a touch above normal, peaking anywhere from 21 to 23. Temperatures remain stable through Saturday and Sunday, around 22, with some passing showers on Saturday. Lots of cloud cover for Sunday. A bit of a break in that precipitation potential for Monday, and then rainfall from a separate system, not Helene, Chris, will be moving in from the west as we get into Tuesday.
Okay, thanks for this, Chris.
You got it.
Take a live look outside. We have had some beautiful sunsets. I know I've been saying it all week, but it has made for these cloudy days for some pretty crazy nights. When we come back, we take a look at greenhouse gas emission targets and if we're on track. Canada is expected to announce a new greenhouse gas emission target in December. Today, the country's top climate advisors released their recommendations on what that target should be. CBC's David Thurton reports.
Canada is one of the highest emitting countries in the world. We are a top 10 emitter of greenhouse gases per person, but also in total. And we have to think about that.
Climate scientist Simon Donner says because we are a big polluter, Canada's climate commitments should be big as well. Donner co-chairs the Net Zero Advisory Body, making him and his group some of the country's top climate advisors. The government has asked his group to recommend what our new 2035 climate target should be. That goal will be announced before the end of this year. Canada's current target is as much as a 45% emissions reduction by 2030. The Net Zero Advisory Body is recommending Canada commit to reducing its emissions by up to 55% by 2035, a difference of more than 70 megatons in 5 years. That new goal will bring Canada in line with the U.S. and other Western countries, according to Donner.
50 to 55% falls out as a very reasonable target range. It also works out that helps us match, not quite match, but at least come close to the ambition we're seeing from our major trading partners and allies.
Canada's Environment Minister has received those recommendations, but he is downplaying expectations before revealing Canada's new target in December.
It needs to be ambitious, but we also need to be able to have some understanding of how we get there. I'm not a big fan of setting targets where we have no idea how we will get there.
Guy Lebeau says his office is still figuring out the right balance. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
As of today, Canadian businesses face new limits on the hiring of temporary foreign workers. The program has ballooned in the years after the pandemic, but now the federal government, they're trying to rein it in. CBC's Paul Duhashik explains.
The owner of this Mexican restaurant relies on cooks from Mexico to keep his business running.
We are an authentic niche restaurant. It's very difficult to find that kind of experience where the food would come out consistently to our standards.
But new rules may keep him from rehiring his temporary foreign workers when their contracts expire. Only 10% of staff can now be hired through the low-wage program, down from 20%. In regions with high unemployment, they can't use it at all. Mike Aitken figures that's where he may lose out.
Without the cooks that we have, I think our doors will be closed.
Another change, contracts are now limited to 1 year. The program's guidelines were loosened in the wake of the pandemic to help businesses deal with labor shortages.
But today's economy is very different from it was 2 years ago. Inflation has started to come down, employment is higher, and we no longer need as many temporary foreign workers.
I think these changes make sense.
Some economists say businesses shouldn't rely on low-wage temporary workers to fill shortages and should raise wages to attract local workers instead.
We have to decide as a country what's our policy priority. Is it to see wage growth and reducing wage inequality, or is it to support restaurants? I think most Canadians would choose the former.
The industry group, Restaurants Canada, says it generally agrees with the shift the government is making, but wants federal help to fill ongoing vacancies.
For us, it's a matching and training program to help newcomers, asylum claimants, to join the workforce and join our industry.
Exceptions to the new rules will be allowed in some industries like healthcare and construction, and the government says it plans to monitor the labor market in the months ahead and could make more changes down the road. Paula Duhachek, CBC News, Calgary.
You heard Chris Potter talking about those dangerous conditions connected to Hurricane Helene. Well, it's bearing down on Florida. That's what it looks like this morning, and it's still well out to sea. Roads filled with water. Forecasts, they're warning about those heavy rains, the flash floods, the winds hitting 200 kilometers an hour and above, plus that storm surge capable of hitting 6 meters high. Swath from Georgia to Tennessee under threat. Atlanta also with a warning. Insurers, they're bracing for potential losses that could hit $3 to $6 billion. Hopes for a ceasefire in the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah have all but vanished. Both sides have stepped up actions in northern Israel and southern Lebanon, ignoring international calls for a 21-day pause. CBC's Chris Brown with the latest.
Hopes that this war could at least pause momentarily didn't survive the morning. Israeli airstrikes hit southern Lebanon first and then smashed into a Beirut apartment building. The IDF says the militia group's commander responsible for drones was killed. The death toll has soared to over 700, including many women and children. This peaceful family was bombed, said Ali Samaha from a village in the Bekaa Valley. 16 people were killed in a night. This is not a military center. Israeli officials from the Prime Minister on down seemingly rejected a U.S.-French proposal for a 21-day ceasefire. We're continuing to hit Hezbollah with full force and will not stop until we achieve all our goals, said Benjamin Netanyahu en route to the UN General Assembly. In northern Israel, machinery and troops appeared to be building up near the border.
There's a siren. Yeah.
As our CBC News team headed in that direction, sirens sounded. Overhead, Israel's missile defenses intercepted Hezbollah rockets. The Iran-backed group may be wounded, but on this day, there were near constant alerts with dozens of rockets fired into Israel.
And this is the impact of at least one or more of those Hezbollah rockets. A fire up in the hills a couple of hundred meters behind these homes in the city of Kiryat Shimona, a community that's been largely evacuated for almost a year now.
Israel has made ending these cross-border attacks a new war goal so that tens of thousands of people can return home, says IDF spokesperson Doron Spielman.
For over a year, we've been sitting patiently, absorbing blow after blow after blow, while dealing with Gaza, where Hamas is trying to kill us. And Hezbollah in the north took an advantage. They see Israel's vulnerable.
In the nearby town of Safed, people wholeheartedly said no to a ceasefire with Hezbollah.
If you negotiate, you're regarded as weak. The only thing they understand is force.
We've been living with rockets throwing at us for years. What country would ever allow that to happen?
Although much of the world is engaged in trying to pull both Israel and Hezbollah back from an even more awful confrontation, the signs we saw in this key border area all suggested it's not happening. Chris Brown, CBC News in northern Israel.
In Jasper, we saw the flames and we saw the smoke, but inside of there, researchers believe there might have been tornadoes made of fire. That's coming up next. The intensity of some recent wildfires created a phenomenon that researchers are just beginning to understand: fire tornadoes. CBC's Julia Wong has the story.
As wildfire ripped through Jasper National Park, the destruction left behind was sometimes baffling, like this shipping container that ended up in a river.
This is a locker, and it was obviously blown into this pole here, wrapped around it.
Now, researchers want to know whether some of it was caused not by wildfire, but one or more fire tornadoes.
We know we have a damage pattern at the surface. It's showing a rotating column of air, but does that rotating column of air attach to a cloud, right? Is it just part of the fire, or is it actually attached to a cloud above?
And yet we've had 2 EF3 tornadoes.
He says a fire tornado can signal a wildfire's intensity and provide information to firefighters on how to respond. So the team recently visited Jasper to survey the destruction from the sky and document debris.
It's really helpful to be able to compare, where that item started and then also where it was carried to afterwards.
We can look at the tree directions and do a detailed study there, and we can try to get actual wind speeds from that.
This fire tornado in BC last summer was Canada's first recorded, and one of very few recorded globally, the team says. Confirmation of a second would be a big deal.
Fire tornadoes are still a very open-ended and brand new field of research.
As the climate changes, there's concern more intense wildfires could make fire tornadoes more common in Canada, creating urgency to learn more about them now.
Is it going to be the case where when these intense fires occur, we're going to get extreme winds? You really need to be aware of the risks that these intense fires pose.
It could take months for the team to definitively say whether any fire tornadoes touched down in Jasper National Park. Research that could teach us what extreme wildfires are really capable of. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Just some absolutely incredible images inside of that piece there. That is it for us. Thank you so much for watching. For news anytime, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. Have a good night.